Have you been thinking about investing in the FTSE 100 and then on analysing the historicals thought to yourselves, has the FTSE 100 had its day? It did, no doubt, get off to a flying start, but most of its growth was in the 90s. The last couple of decades have seen negligible growth. In fact, from the year 2000 to the present day, the growth is negligible. However, one characteristic of the FTSE 100 is that it does fluctuate a lot, and it is those peaks and troughs, or rather taking advantage of them in strategic buying, that could make a world of difference to the long-term investor. Although many of you may think, well, can't I do better if I just pick individual shares because this company has grown this much and that one has grown that much? That's fine in hindsight, but trying to work out what's going to happen over the next 5 years, picking out shares, a handful of shares out of thousands and thousands, is literally looking for a needle in a haystack. It is gambling. The safest way by far is to invest in an ETF like the FTSE 100, and compared to the S&P 500, the FTSE over the last decade has literally been a waste of time. The S&P 500 has experienced phenomenal growth, but to understand the difference in growth between the S&P 500 and the FTSE, we need to look at the makeup of those two different indices. When we look at the FTSE 100, we see the companies by market capitalisation: Unilever, AstraZeneca, HSBC, GlaxoSmithKline, British American Tobacco. Then we move on to the petroleums like BP and Shell. These are all traditional companies. Pharmaceuticals, alcohol, food delivery, supermarkets, petroleums. They're not really going to set the world alight. However, when we look at the S&P 500, we see that their top companies are Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, Facebook, Tesla, and the size of these companies is colossal. To give you an idea of the difference in market capitalisation between the FTSE 100 and the S&P 500, the FTSE 100 total market capitalisation is 1.8 trillion. Apple alone is worth over 2 trillion. I think that puts it in perspective. Also, technology only makes up around 1.5 to 2% of the FTSE 100, but it actually makes up about 25 to 30% of the S&P 500. Companies of the future which are growing rapidly and will continue to grow. Therefore, I wouldn't consider going for just one or just the other, because whilst the S&P 500 offers significant growth, the FTSE 100 is still a fairly safe bet with traditional companies. Therefore, diversifying your portfolio is the safest way. But how do you buy strategically? Now, most investment funds will advise you to set up a direct debit and invest a monthly amount based on what you can afford, whether it's £10 a month, £100 a month, or £1,000 a month, whatever that may be. I would urge you to consider a slightly different strategy. Work out your total annual budget of what you can afford to invest into a fund. That is money that you are able to invest into a fund and not need to call upon for at least 5 years, because the last thing you want is to have to sell when the market's low, because then you actually do lose money. If you don't need to sell, then it can be directly compared to buying a house. Prices rise. When things have taken a turn, property has dropped by as much as 40%, but you don't lose any money unless you actually need to sell and not buy anything else. So I would urge you to invest no more than 25-30% of your annual budget on a monthly basis. and leave the rest on reserve, that you can actually then have pre-orders depending on the platform you're on, so that if the market drops by 5%, you will make a one-off purchase of X amount. If it drops by 10%, you'll make a one-off purchase of this amount, and if it drops by 20% or more, then you would make a one-off investment of X amount. Once again, your money's going into the safe place, because the FTSE 100 is safe. It is the top largest 100 companies in the UK. It merely fluctuates. But by investing monthly to flatten out that line, but leaving some money in reserve so that when there's a drop you can take advantage of buying at a discount, will make a significant difference over a year. It will make a massive difference over 5 years, and it will make a colossal difference over a decade. But you haven't taken any risk. You haven't been speculating on trying to guess which shares are going to go up, which shares are going to go down, and certainly don't invest money that you are putting aside for your future into penny shares, because they can be a bottomless pit. If you go on a platform such as Free Trade or Trade 212, you are able to invest in these markets, and you can diversify your portfolio to cover yourself in the safest way. I am able to go into this in much more depth. I may do in the future, but if you have any questions initially because you're thinking about beginning to invest, the time to do so is now. And for those of you who are just leaving university or just starting work, let me put this to you. If you can actually begin to put £100 a month on average, whether you invest 100 a month or simply 25, 30 and buy in, as I've said before, but an average of £100 a month, over 2 or 3 decades, you will amass a significant lump sum that will affect your future and the rest of your life and the future of your family. You may be thinking to yourself, well, I can't afford £100 a month. I would say, look at the cost of your mobile phone, look what you spend on a night out, look at unnecessary expenses, be they takeaways, things like that, and then you don't need to raise the whole 100 with savings. You could literally raise some of it by saving money and some of it by trying to get a little money come in. Whether you look at technology like YouTube, selling on eBay, whatever the case may be, £100 a month is very, very feasible for nearly everyone to come up with. And I think many people over the last year during the lockdown have realised just how much money they were squandering before that they could save. And if you invest that money wisely on a monthly basis from a young age, you can secure your future and you'll have a sizable lump sum when you need it most. If you have any questions, please feel free as always to contact me directly, and I'll see you in the next video.